Good evening. Happy New Year, although I have just seen a comment there saying, just want to point out that it's bad luck to wish someone Happy New Year until after the bells. Happy New Year, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Well, the bells will have rung somewhere, won't they? Because New Year has started. Other side of the world, they don't wait for us. So somewhere, and given that this is vaguely international, this stream, um, somewhere it will already be New Year, and it will have been New Year for hours. In fact, in Australia, they'll be wondering why we're still banging on about it. It's been New Year for ages. It's just not quite here yet. So anyway, let's have a look. And amongst those, Kerry asking, I wonder how many more Tory MPs, or Tories will resign. I assume you mean MPs will resign their seats this year. It may not have to be that many. If you look at the actual resignations of MPs this year, you do get a few. Bear in mind, you do get them in various parts. It's not just the Conservatives. But when you look at the ones that have resigned who have been Conservative MPs, triggering by-elections, it has generally been as a result of Boris Johnson messing about. You know, Owen Paterson, for example, yes, he may well have faced a recall petition with the suspension he was going to get anyway, but, you know, under normal circumstances, there was a decent chance that he would have won that by-election if indeed he'd have elected to stand in it again. It was Boris Johnson's indiscretions that meant that it was impossible to even countenance it. The only real resignation I can think of that had nothing to do with the leadership was probably Neil Parish, who was tractor porn guy. But there we go. There might be defections too. See, I'm actually hoping there's not going to be defections. I don't really like defections. You know, I appreciate that, you know, the Labour sort of covers this broad church, as they're saying, the Conservatives cover this broad church. And if you're sort of in the middle, I can appreciate that people sort of in the middle will think, well, the Conservatives under this particular leader, I prefer them, or Labour under this particular leadership, I prefer them. But I don't really like the idea of MPs flipping between them, because an MP should be the most committed to the party. Like, I don't think people should, I think people should think very carefully about even joining political parties. I think if you join a political, I'm not saying you sign your name in blood and it's there forever, but if you join a political party, you should be thinking, I'm quite committed to this party. Not a flash in the pan because it suddenly gets a leader you like. If you stand for election under a party's banner, you should be really, really committed to it. So I don't trust people who defect, in all honesty. I wouldn't trust Conservative MPs who defect to Labour. You know, Wakeford will be the Labour candidate. He was the one who did defect, and if the local party are okay with that, okay. I'm not happy. I don't like them. But anyway, that's just mine. Was that puff piece by Owen Jones the worst he's written in a long while? No, no. I don't actually read a lot of these. I used to read them quite a lot. The thing is, Owen Jones is not actually an idiot, really. It's just that, you know, things that I'll have read from him in the past, it's when you're writing about something that doesn't challenge you, then you don't have to come up with a load of nonsense to justify a point of view. The problem comes with when you have to talk about something that directly challenges your ideology, your political philosophy, because then you're sort of stuck in a situation where you either have to face up to the inconsistencies with your views and accept them, embrace them, and either change them or say, well, yes, there is this, but on balance, this is why I still hold this view, or you just have to make some shit up. And the problem is that Jones, like a lot of people who are prominent in politics, whether as a politician or a commentator, has a bit of an ego, and he can't accept that he's got things wrong. So he invents a history or an explanation for a history that makes it that he wasn't wrong about anything at all. I mean, we see it on a grand scale with Boris Johnson. But there you go. I can see some defections to Reform UK. Can you? I'm not sure, you know. I mean, you could. It depends what the reason would be. If the reason is because they think the Conservatives are going to be in for a torrid time and they've got more chance as the Reform UK MP, I'm not sure that makes sense. I don't think Reform UK will win any seats. I don't want to say anything too definite when you are still nowhere near the general election campaign. We'll have to see what happens. But I cannot see Reform UK winning a single seat. So I don't think that will work. Now, if there are some Tory MPs who have basically already decided that they're going to lose their next seat at the next election anyway, come what may, and let's say they are on the hard right and they're not particularly invested in the Conservative Party, they used it for their own purposes, as a lot of politicians do. Yes, maybe they can do that in order to try and raise the profile, in order to try and get the issues, give it a wider... Because at the moment, Reform UK, I mean, we know that, particularly when they've got Nigel Farage banging on, always get plenty of media time anyway. But if there were suddenly to be, say, 10 Tory MPs defected to Reform UK, knowing that they're going to lose anyway and just think, right, to hell with it, let's just do this. In theory, they could actually get themselves an official right to a voice on the media. But so we'll have to see. But I'm not sure. I mean, it doesn't make strategic sense for an MP to defect to Reform UK in order to increase their chances of winning their seats. I think it would make it impossible to win their seat. Reform UK exists not to win seats. They exist to cost the Conservative seats, as they did as the Brexit Party in 2019, where they stood. Labour shouldn't take any more defections. See, I wouldn't. In all honesty, I wouldn't. I gather there have been talks, but as nothing's come to it yet, I am hoping that it is because Labour are thinking, yeah, we don't need more. Because it is tricky, isn't it? Like, imagine a scenario where Labour accept these defections, allow them to become candidates, and you end up with about 6 or 7 of these former Conservatives on your benches. And let's say you don't win a large majority, aren't you going to be looking over your shoulder? Because if these people defected once, why wouldn't they do it again? You know, and think about why they're defecting. They will be defecting either because they think they're going to lose their seat with the Tories at the moment, or because they just don't agree with the way the leadership's gone. Well, both of those things are going to flip back after the next election. The leadership will change, but also it may well be that for the following election, the Conservatives look like they're in with a better shout against it. I wouldn't. I'd steer clear of them, in all honesty. But anyway, will the Conservative Party allow their party members to elect their next leader? Only if they're stupid. I mean, it should be like the 3-card trick, isn't it? You know, what they should. You know, I don't think party members should ever elect the leader. And I say that as a party member. I don't want party members having any say at all in the leader. You know, MPs are the best place to decide who the leader should be. Now, they won't always get the decision right, but they are the best placed. Party members are arguably the worst placed, because party members are very interested in politics, but they can be quite insular. I say they, we, I'm a party member, can be quite insular, and you can have this view. If you think about it, say from a point of view, more in my experience, Labour Party members, when you get together and you're basically an echo chamber, you'll have some disagreements, but you're bouncing off each other and talking about how certain policies just make sense. Why don't we do this? It makes sense. Oh, you think it makes sense too. Oh, and you think it makes sense. Oh, well, that's confirmation bias then, isn't it? It must make sense. So you have this view that your views are more mainstream than they really are. And you end up with a distorted view of things. Now, party members have nothing to do with the leader. So any MPs, so the thing is as well, Conservative MPs have got a lot more say over the process. Labour MPs don't. You know, the way leaderships work in Labour, it's like written down, it's in stone, it's, you know, MPs can't just change it like Conservative MPs can. You know, this trick they pulled for the second leadership contest, where they said, right, you're gonna have, like, you need 100 MPs to nominate you. Labour couldn't have fiddled the rules like that halfway through. So, unless they had the NEC on side. So when Corbyn technically fiddled his the second time round, it was because he had the NEC on side. So it was almost like they changed the rules in retrospect. But Tory MPs, for choosing the next leader, should be mindful of the fact that the party members will choose the wrong one. And if they're serious about trying to get themselves back into shape, they obviously can't have Rishi Sunak, and they're better off not having him anyway. He's not very good. But what they ought to do is present Tory members with two choices, where one of them, that contains their pick, and another one who is so bad that even Tory party members can't vote for them. The problem is which Tories are going to be left, because there's plenty of insane Tory MPs as well. I'm saying this as if Tory MPs are all pragmatic and sensible, but it may well be that the pragmatic and sensible ones are the ones who lose their seats, and what's left are the nutters. Anyway, let's catch up with some more comments. Keep rambling on. Lots of my neighbours say they'll vote reform. Amen to that, split the vote. Well, yes. I am still wary of them. I don't like the way they sort of poison the political narrative. But strategically speaking, and they do take votes away from Labour, but strategically speaking, they take more from the Conservatives. And I expect that to be the same come the next election. You know, I don't rule out, I don't want to say just because the Brexit party took way more Conservative votes than Labour votes at the last one, that automatically it will follow for Reform UK, but I strongly suspect it will. How much sympathy do I feel for people who voted for Brexit in 2016, voted Tory in 17 and 19, and now suffering the high cost of living? I always have enormous sympathy for people who come to accept the consequences of their decisions. So anyone who's still blindly insisting that all the shit that's going on is something else, I've no sympathy at all. Zero. Doesn't matter how badly off they are. I might have some sympathy for any dependents they have who are innocent, but none at all. No matter how bad their circumstances, you know, if they lose their home, if they're still refusing to accept their responsibility, I'll have no sympathy. If they've realised they were lied to, that they were conned, then I have absolutely every sympathy. You know, I'm all about the redemption. Not that they'll redeem themselves, but at least they, you know, a little revelation can stop them doing something quite so stupid again, or at least make it less likely. How dangerous for Tory chances next election is the general inexperience of the newest batch? I mean, excuse me, the election campaign itself is run by campaign strategists. MPs are kept to very carefully controlled scripts. They will be given, you know, they'll have their campaign literature basically designed for them. They'll be told what to say and what not to say. You know, they will be quite heavily coached. So obviously a good campaigner is worth their weight in gold in a campaign, but mostly the inexperience of the MPs is less of a problem during a campaign because they're given scripts. It's more of a problem outside of campaign time because then they're doing and saying things without a minder, which is when you get the problems. Can we get a link to the gaming channel mentioned on occasion? Has to be worth checking out. It's half as good as this. It's not half as good as, in fact, I haven't put anything on it for a month. Really, I shouldn't put anything on it ever. It's just every now and then I just can't help myself. But it's not. I don't do anything. I only game very casually, so there's nothing really to put on it. Did I see that Rees-Mogg for leader? No. Who is some lunatic arguing that? That would be vaguely hilarious. In fact, do you know what? Right, okay. Predictions is a mug's game. But if the Conservatives... The thing is, Rees-Mogg's probably going to lose his seat at the next election, so it's not going to happen. But should we put it this way? If the Conservatives, after the next election, would like to elect someone who is a complete no-hoper, totally out of touch like Rees-Mogg, they can be my guest. Because I would quite like Labour to have a relatively easy run at the next one. See, although you could argue if they're going to have an idiot, do you go for them early? I mean, where the Conservatives had a bit of a problem, when they lost last time, when John Major lost, they then elected William Hague as leader. Now, William Hague's quite a clever man. And arguably, where he went wrong was standing for leader at that time, when Labour had come in with such a large majority and with such plans. And the plans came to fruition very quickly. You know, come the following election, the standard of living was much higher. The economy had grown much more. So whoever was Tory leader at the time was going to lose that election. And it could be argued that if there's an actual star in the making in the Conservative Party, they would do well not to put their hat into the ring for the first leader of the opposition job for them. You know, I think anyone who thinks that they could actually make a really good Conservative leader, I would say look at the results first. I would say judge the results. Think to yourself, realistically, how likely are Labour to lose the next, to be a one-term party? And if you're looking at it and you're thinking, no, I think we're in trouble here, Labour are likely to win the next election as well, don't stand for the leadership. Wait for the following one. You're also a casual gamer. You played Sims for quite a bit. It's my favourite computer game. Tend to build houses a lot on it, but I like making people. See, I like the violent. I like MMOs. I club things, people over the head with it. But anyway. I think there's room for a few centrist Conservatives to go Lib Dem too. See, generally speaking, I wouldn't actually expect many defections because, you know, at the beginning when I said that I don't think people should stand to be an MP for a party unless they're really committed to that party. I don't think I'm the only one who thinks that. I think generally speaking, party leaderships have the same view. And they'll tend to be, you know, there's a vetting process, for example. So defections, you could argue defections amongst seats that you didn't expect to win are more likely because you probably vet them less closely. You know, a seat you don't expect to win, you don't pay that much attention to the candidates. You know, you just sort of let the local group pick whoever. Or you might throw them someone to give them some experience for later. But there's, yeah, IDS emergency caretaker. Yeah, they should have made Ian Duncan Smith the leader first off. William Hague should have just waited a bit. Because, you know, he arguably would have been in a better position if he'd have just waited until Labour were a little bit... I know it can look a bit funny, because if you are ambitious, because you've got to explain to your colleagues why you're not standing. You know, and you don't really want to say to them, because I would never win the next election. I would like to wait until, you know, we've been in opposition for a bit. You know, that's a bit defeatist. You'll lose a lot of support for saying that, but you need to find a way of getting out. I mean, politics is all about getting out of things, isn't it, ultimately? So you need to get out of a poison chalice. But there we go. You're saying you've had a few Pernod's, lemonades and blats, played Cluedo with the kids, demolished a takeout. Have I missed anything? No. In fact, I actually was thinking that we would have a bit of a review of the last year. That's not happening. We're just talking nonsense. I don't actually know even what we're talking about. We have been talking about. Somehow we ended up. It's my fault. I ended up getting back onto what happened. The Tories lost last time. There's an extremely negative narrative on Brexit from the Brexit media now. Few voices argue in favour. Is this proceeding ahead of where I expected it to be? Brexit's only mentioned migration. I really didn't know where I expected it to be. As soon as Labour took a position of not pointing out all the damage of Brexit, I really didn't know where we were in terms of timeframes. Because I anticipated, although I was well aware, and I accept that Labour have made the right decision because the results have proven it, although I was aware that there were a lot of people in 2019 voted for the Conservatives not for Brexit, but just to make Brexit go away, just to finish it off one way or the other. They didn't realise that there was another referendum available. I did think to myself, it's going to be quite tricky. Brexit is going to be a major issue for some time. But I didn't realise that Labour would feel the need to adopt a very hands-off approach to it. I thought that they would gleefully point out all the damage that was being done to the economy as a result of at least the hard Brexit. But as things have turned out, they, for strategic reasons, have to take the position they've taken, which is unfortunate. But it means I do not know where we are with timing. What I would anticipate, because I have to think in terms of when general elections are. So if the general election is in 2024, the next one will probably be 2028. In that particular situation, it will be, I would think, if you think about the way public opinion has gone in 2 years, and now the media are reporting a little bit more honest. It's only a little bit, it's baby steps, but a little bit more frankly about it. We're now getting people on Question Time slagging Brexit off and getting applause. We're seeing people on Question Time trying to defend Brexit and getting stony silence or disapproving looks. So it's going there, and you think in 2 more years' time, how much further will it have gone? Then you think, okay, Labour have had to rule out single market and customs union in the next Parliament. They haven't technically, I mean, until the manifesto is published, we can't say anything, but, you know, I don't expect an about face on that. But it is possible. But if not, if they have to continue with the position they have now, the issue is that the economy is not going to grow properly. It's not going to get back to pre-Brexit levels because we've lost too much by cutting ourselves out of the single market. We're not gaining anything anywhere else. It's not like we've lost this, but we've gained this. We've gained nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, and any party in government has to grow the economy. So you just think, you know, there has to come a point. It would be a lot easier if Labour got behind proportional representation, because if they got behind proportional representation, the target voters change. The whole political dynamic changes. The strategy changes. You know, this is one of the reasons why it's just powerfully in Labour's interests to go for proportional representation. But I don't know whether they're going to or not. So I don't know where we are with timing. I just think that the current position of no to single market and customs union rejoining cannot last for that much longer. At the same time, I still think it will be a very long time before we can rejoin them, because a lot of things have to happen. But in terms of getting the public ready to say we want to, I cannot see the current situation lasting more than a few more years. If Labour win, would we team up with Max and make a cover of Things Can Only Get Better? You really don't want me singing. I was banned from singing at a drunken karaoke. That's how bad I am. Should we be worrying that Wes Streeting seems to be suggesting that Labour will increase the use of private health providers in the NHS? No. People are taking that to mean increasing the level of privatisation in the NHS. That's not what it means at all. It doesn't mean that. What he's saying is, at the moment, we've got a queue of, think about it at the moment, it's 7 million. 7 million people waiting for hospital treatment. That's ridiculous. That's a massive blow to the economy and those people's standard of living. Those people need treating. So what Streeting is saying, he's quite clumsy about the way he says it sometimes. What he's saying is, we need to treat those people. In fact, when they get into power, there'll be an even longer queue of waiting. There'll be even longer waiting time. They need treating. How do we treat them? We can't magic out of thin air more NHS capacity. They can keep putting more money into it and trying to build it back up, but it takes many years. So what are they going to do? They can't also just throw money at it, because like when the NHS was originally set up, because the economy is going to be in such a bad state. So what all he's saying is, what we're going to do is get those people treated with whatever capacity exists in this country, and that will include private healthcare. It doesn't mean bringing private healthcare into the NHS. It just means using it to clear the backlog. Do I have any plans for the channel in the new year? Yes, to keep doing the channel. I always think it's actually quite funny. I do, and I was just talking to my partner today about it. I do always try and consider what may happen. Like I was, I won't be able to show you easily actually. I was doing a little bit of analysis today, because this year has been quite funny. And there was just something a little bit funny about the balance of views. I didn't really know what it was, so I did some analysis today. So I've split views into UK and rest of world views. And what was happening, I'm looking at the chart now, I can't quickly show you, so it's not worth it anyway for now. But UK views were below 50%. Most of you, in terms of the country where most of my views are from, it's from the UK. But there were more viewers from outside the UK than in the UK, if you see what I mean. That changed this year, around about March, April, around about Easter. And since then, I've had more than 50% of my views being UK viewers. And in terms of the raw numbers as well, it's quite interesting, is the number of UK viewers, it fluctuates a lot, but it's generally been going up, including this year. But the viewers from the rest of the world, there's been a distinct reduction this year. And I suppose part of the reason for that will be that Brexit, as well as other associated bits of British politics, are probably not as interesting. You know, the pointing and laughing has probably become a little bit tiresome. So I've gotten fewer international viewers this year. You know, it sort of was doing this and it's done this year. Whereas for UK viewers, it's sort of carried on going up-ish. So that's an odd one there. You say Wes Streeting's a realist. He may be a realist, but he's still an arsehole. But at the end of the day, yeah, the language is just too... He's considered one of Labour's best communicators as well. I just think, God almighty. Wes Streeting's your MP. As a member of the Labour Party, I'll be eventually looking for him to clarify certain positions, including this one. See, the thing is, there is an extent to which you've got to think about who they're targeting with all their messages. Remember, it's strategic. This is why I say pay attention to the policy. And the reason I will say that, to anyone politically interested, pay attention to the policy, not so much the rhetoric. The reason for that is voters pay attention to the rhetoric and not the policy. So what you need to do is pay attention. The policy is what tells the story. Now, granted, until the manifesto is produced, we don't have the firm policy, but nothing in what Streeting or Starmer or anyone else has said suggests that they're going to increase privatisation in the NHS. It actually suggests that they're going to increase investment in the NHS, but that they're going to use private healthcare to get rid of the backlog. Now, I will still want to pay very careful attention to it too, because I did not like the sort of the PPI of the Blair years. I understood a little bit of it in order to sort of rapidly expand capacity. Because remember, during the Tories before New Labour, there were also winter NHS crises, not as bad as now, but there were still. Every winter the NHS was in crisis because it didn't have the capacity. So for Labour to deal with that, they did have to clear the backlog again. You know, Blair had to clear a backlog, and that meant using some private capacity. But I just think I would prefer they took a longer term view and used it only to clear backlogs rather than to make it a normal part of the way it does business. But, you know, so, you know, I will also want to pay very careful attention to that. Should Starmer be taken to task for all the open goals Labour have missed and all the own goals they've scored? I don't know they've been scoring that many, have they? In terms of missing ones, what they're doing is just trying to focus on their key messages. You know, and I as I try to explain to people, your target voters don't pay careful attention to politics. If they did, they wouldn't be your target voters because they will make their own minds up. You know, the people you're targeting don't pay that much attention to politics. They'll vote, but they don't really think too deeply about it. So you can't confuse the issue with lots of different messages. But at the same time, what they need to do, what Labour do need to, and they recognise this, I think, is they also need to present this like vision, like what's the country going to be like a few years after a Labour government. I think that's the main thing that's missing at the moment. And I do know that people in the strategy team have said the same thing. You know, that's what people want to know. The thing is, as soon as we're on the trajectory to join, it's surely a much easier job for the party in power to align and quickly fix the current issues. I mean, my attitude is Labour have already promised to turn us around. You know, all that's happened is, if you think about the routes to rejoining, what they've promised is to take several steps in that direction, but then stop at a particular point. It's the stopping at a particular point that people have an issue with. But I would just say, look, are they promising to go in that direction? Yes, right. If they then actually did stop, then we can take issue with it. But at the moment, the Conservatives are promising to carry on going down the wrong path, and Labour are promising to get onto the right path. They just disagree about the destination. So I would say, well, you know, it's a no-brainer for me. I've missed my comment. Sorry, Adam. Do I think that timeline is realistic? Be most likely around 10 years from now, then longer to negotiate. I don't know. This is what I mean. There's two big unknowns for me. The EU is not an unknown. The EU will say no at the moment. That's why it's no point in Labour saying, oh, we should rejoin the single market, because the EU would say no. I'm not sure they'd say no to the customs union. I don't see any reason why they would say no to that. I think that should be fine. But the single market, the EU would tell us to do one if we were to ask now. They need to know that we're committed. That means the Conservatives have to accept. And the thing is, it would be lovely to think that when the Conservatives lose, they'll think to themselves, right, it's Brexit stuffed us here, Brexit knackered us, so we need to like start being more practical. But it won't happen. I think they need to lose too. And I'm not the only one. I've seen other people thinking the Conservatives need to feel that they cannot get back on the path to power until they're more pragmatic with their Brexit views. And that is going to have to mean rejoining the single market. So until the Tories, because the thing is, if you think about it, the EU, even letting us back into the single market, it's less of a big deal than the EU proper. But even letting us back into the single market, what if they do that? We have all the groundwork prepared, and then the Tories come back to power and stuff it up. And you think to yourself, well, the EU have already got the infrastructure, but what if we don't leave the single market, but we keep messing about? So then you keep having to have lengthy court cases going on, like with the Northern Ireland Protocol. The EU right now will be thinking to themselves, Northern Ireland Protocol on a grand scale. Until the Tories admit that they've gotten Brexit wrong, at least the implementation, then we cannot rejoin. I don't pierce the question again. I think I misunderstood. Okay, I may have done, because is a Tory manifesto worth the paper it's written on these days? No, because there's things they actually want to do, and they'll be in the manifesto, and they will try to do them. And then there's things they put in the manifesto to get elected. They don't mean those. Are we looking at Edinburgh in the background? Yeah, it's the only part of the UK that really has a good reason to do anything on New Year. Like the rest of the UK, New Year's Eve is really just an excuse to get drunk. Admittedly, the Scots are quite happy to have excuses to get drunk as well. But they do, at least, there is a cultural thing, you know, Hogmanay is at least something in Scotland. New Year's Eve, like, okay, cultures around the world celebrate the bringing in of the new year to some extent, but it's not, we don't do anything in this country. At midnight, a load of people will cheer. They'll all be drunk. They're cheering because they're drunk and someone's told them to cheer. But nothing happens. We don't do anything. Will English keep thinking they're special, or will they start voting a more European style of government with proper healthcare and social contract? We need proportional representation for that. Like at the moment, people in this country are completely at odds with the governments we keep producing. That is because the majority of people, like politically engaged people, do not get a voice. In 3/4 of the seats, you vote however you like, it makes no difference. You know, in 3/4 of the country, it makes zero difference how you vote in Westminster elections. It's not that much better in other elections. So until you change that system, then we are never going to get the governments that match our, and people will judge a population by the governments we get. But this is not the governments people vote for. We don't vote for these governments. Keeping looking out for Adam's repost. Need science in government. It would be nice to have a few scientists in the government, yes. Instead of people with pissing useless degrees in PPE or classics. You know, Boris Johnson thinks he's clever because he can recite sections from the Iliad or something. Bloody use is that. He doesn't learn any of the lessons from it. Second EU ref will be voting the Tories into the bin. The Tories there won't be a referendum until the Tories are on side with it. I mean, like I keep saying, the current Conservative politics cannot possibly last 20. I mean, in terms of time frame, I don't want to think this far ahead because it's too long. But in 20 years' time, the current politics won't work, because my generation, which doesn't fit, has no, like by and large, has no issue with the EU. We do have an issue with shooting ourselves in the foot. We're not particularly enamoured of the Conservatives. When we become the older generation, then the Conservatives will have to reform or die out. I'm saying I don't drink alcohol at all, so certainly won't be drunk. No, well, are you going to be cheering? Because I've never seen a person on New Year's cheer that wasn't drunk. Lords should be trial by combat only entry. Yeah, but there's plenty of dickheads who could win a trial by combat. Scientists like Margaret Thatcher. Well, she was at least more realistic. Like, you know, scientists will have politics I'll disagree with as well, but at least they're pragmatic. You know, Margaret Thatcher would never have gone along with Brexit. Jonathan Gullis for PM. Yeah, sure. If he's going to lose his seat as well, though. That's the thing is, like, if the Conservatives want to elect a complete no-hoper after they lose, be my guest. They can be my guest, because the best thing is for the Conservatives to have to face up to the fact that the way they think at the moment is a problem for getting power back again. And remember, there will be intelligent, critically thinking Conservatives. They will look at the data that I've been looking at, which shows that the next generations do not vote Tory. In fact, hang on, I might actually just try and get this one back up, because it's really, for those who may not have seen it, it's really quite spectacular. And I'm just going to check. I'll try and ignore all the cultural stuff. Here it is. Hold on. See if I can find the graph again. And then very quickly post it up. Come on, quickly. There we go. Right. Is it going to go to? Yes, it is. Good. So this graph, I've used this recently. Is oh no, hang on, everything's going wrong. There it is. Right. So this graph, the UK is the one on the left. So you've got your boomer generation, for example, which we're well aware of, just gets more conservative as it gets older. By and large, we know there are boomers who are not, but the general trend is no one starts off conservative when they're young, because why would you? The Conservatives, as a concept, conservatism is a selfishness. It's about being like maintaining things for the sake of it. It's like tradition with no good reason, that sort of thing. So no one young is going to be conservative, by and large anyway. But then you look at like Generation X, which is my generation, although I'm nearer the end of it than the beginning. And although the trend towards conservatism as we get older is there, you can see, like, even at 60, you're still below the national average. So the Conservatives are not going to get as many votes when my generation is properly old, and I'm sort of, where's the thing? Oh no, oh bugger it, I'll just leave it. But I'm sort of on. Well, I'm 46, so I'm sort of there. I'm a bit back on it. So when my age group is in the 60s, and the youngest, or the oldest, sorry, Generation Xers are much older, Conservatives are going to struggle. So that's what I mean. In 20 years' time, the Conservatives are going to struggle for votes. And then you look at millennials coming behind them. They're not interested. Even if there's a little bit of an upturn, that's not going to get anywhere near that equilibrium line. There's nothing. So Conservatives, as they are now, with their current policies and rhetoric, are doomed. You understand, I'm a non-British viewer, but as a European, what the Brits make up is important to Europe, so it's a very good source of what is going on in that isolated little island. Yeah, it is isolated. It's going to become more isolated. That's their plan, build a 10-foot hedge around the country so that we can stop seeing everyone else having a nice time. But anyway, so Corbyn was just 20 years too early. No, behave. Wish people would stop. He's a man stuck in the past. Some of the policies he would like to see are progressive policies, but he's stuck in the past. He had no plan for delivering them. That's the problem. What we need is someone who has a plan. It's all right, and because that's too much of the problem when you've got people who are sort of fairly extreme in politics. I don't necessarily mean on the either wing, but I mean just like very committed to politics. They quickly congregate around people who share their political philosophy, and they'll think, well, I will support the leader who shares my political philosophy, but there's no consideration whether they've got a plan for actually delivering it at all, which is why I take the view I will support if there's 20 policies that I think are really important, I will support the leader who has a plan for delivering 10 of them than the one who agrees with all 20 but doesn't have a plan for delivering any of them, because they're not going to get, I'm not going to get anything from them. Doesn't matter how much we might agree. They don't know what they're doing. Do I not think that these may be writing too much into those graphs because they're a product of now in recent times, not a projection to the future? Those youngsters could yet shift right. No, because look at it, all of them when they're they've followed a completely different path through their 20s. Look, compare on the left, Generation X with millennials as an example. The Generation X, compared to the boomers, started higher up effectively. Like you could almost argue it's not more right wing. But they sort of fairly, and it's only in their 40s that they tilt upwards. Whereas boomers just went up all the time. They just went up, 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 up. But these were the generation who benefited from capitalism. The boomer generation benefited from capitalism because they got themselves on the housing ladder, nice cheap house. You could have been, as a boomer, you could have been a police officer or a nurse or something like that, got yourself a house that's now worth like £500,000 because you could get that in the 70s. You could get a mortgage on a place that would now be worth £500,000 on the salary of a nurse or a police officer or a firefighter. You could do that. You can't now. So what's happened is millennials in particular are not benefiting from the policies that Conservatives push. I would argue boomers didn't benefit either, because when you had Conservative governments in place, when it comes to things like home ownership, they don't build houses. So actually they'd have still been better off, but they think they're better off with Conservatives. Whereas you try and tell a millennial that they don't even think they're better off. How could they think they're better off? They can't get onto the housing ladder. If you think about, say 20 years ago, if you'd have got a mortgage 20 years ago for a house round here, and maybe you'd be paying, say, £300 a month for your mortgage repayments. Right now, you'll still be paying £300 a month, maybe a little bit more because the interest rates have gone up. So let's say £350 or £400 even. Your rent will be £600 or more. £700, £800, something like that. So, and that just gets worse. Your rent's going to keep going up, but your mortgage payments don't. They only go up with interest rates. I'm saying I was supportive of Corbyn when he was leader, but I didn't consider could he plan stuff because I don't really have that ability myself. So if that sounds not, well, it's what a lot of people think. They think that when someone becomes prime minister, they can just say, "Oh, do this thing," and civil servants will just do it. Oh, nationalise this, nationalise that, and it will just happen. It's like, no, you need to have a plan to do it. Have you got a plan? And the plan isn't just where's the money coming from, because you've also, the part of the plan has to be political. Will it let you win the next election? Because here's what will happen. Guaranteed what would have happened. let's say Jeremy Corbyn was a little bit more realistic, at least in terms of strategy. And instead of taking advice from people like Len McCluskey and Owen Jones, let's say he'd have got some real political strategists to advise him, right? And he'd have won in 2017, because he could have done. If they weren't caught on the hop, if they'd have had the Conservatives messed up badly. So let's say, right, I'll tell you what would have happened. He would have borrowed massively to deliver his programme quite quickly. He'd have done what the Tories did with Brexit, tried to deliver it really quickly, recklessly, only without the media explaining how brilliant it was, right? The next election he'd have lost, which would be round about now, because if he'd have had the election in 2017, this year he would have lost the election 5 years later, right? I'll tell you what would have happened now. The Tories would have sold it all off again. When I say sold it off, I mean basically giving it away. And the Tories would be in power for the next 15 years because they'd have brought austerity back and they'd have blamed it on Labour. They'd have said Labour were too reckless with the money. They ramped up the borrowing. Now we've got to deal with it. They'd have got rid of the public services. We wouldn't have anything left. Half a year later, we'd have nothing left. Maybe it would have taken another year or so. But that's what would have happened. That is what would have happened. In his rush to nationalise everything, he'd have caused economic ruin. Not ruin, actually, that's probably going a bit far. But he'd have caused a lot. The markets would have reacted to his plans just like they had reacted to Liz Truss's plans. Only he would not find anyone in the media willing to even treat it with any credibility. He would have lost the next election. The Tories would have sold it, all those public assets back, and they'd get to bring in austerity and blame it all on Labour again. That's what would have happened. You've got to have a plan to not just deliver it economically but politically. And if you don't have one, then it's not going to work. Could not always do that as a single one, Phil Boomer, who got on the housing ladder at age 49 due to the sale of council house. Sorry, but that was not going to turn that down to stay on rent. No, this is true. In the 70s, women still, I think, couldn't get a mortgage themselves, but in reality, many would have been married, and it would have worked out as the same thing. It does sometimes, yes. It has to be borne in mind we were very late with women's rights and even things like getting property. Do I think Labour will end the right to buy when they get elected? I strongly... Well, I don't know exactly what their housing policy is going to be. I do know that although they will have to encourage more affordable housing, which is something the Conservatives don't do, they are going to know that there is a massive housing problem and that is not going to be fixed overnight because we've got limited capacity in the building industry. Like, even if I didn't know it from anywhere else, my partner is, she works for a building supplier. They make bricks, tiles, things like that. So they supply the construction industry. And at the moment, they're not having any problem selling at all. Their sales team doesn't need any great skills because the industry, the construction industry, cannot get enough materials. So when you're in a situation like that and you think, can we then suddenly escalate our building program? I don't see how. I don't see how. The best thing they could do is put a greater emphasis on affordable housing. In terms of getting rid of the rights to buy, the problem with that is it would be I would think quite an unpopular policy amongst target voters. So it would sound a bit dodgy to me to back that. But we'll have to wait and see what is in the manifesto, because I haven't seen a lot of detail on that yet. There is also the politics of it as well, because just like the Conservatives don't want more houses built because They don't want young people getting on the housing ladder because that helps them, or they think it does. Ironically, it's one of the reasons why they're losing in the next 20 years. But right now it helps them because the current homeowners don't want new. They've got their house. They don't want more houses being built. Brings down the value of their house. Whereas for Labour, you could argue it used to be traditionally more beneficial. They'd get way more voters amongst council house residents than people who own their own homes. But if Labour are looking ahead to the future, what's that likely to be? If it's still the case, then you could argue that there is a benefit for them to stop it, as long as they don't piss off too many people that they need to carry on voting for them. So something like that, I think they'll have to poll very carefully. From Adam, prediction wish, next election is on the economy, Labour wins. The one after, PR is a manifesto promise. Labour win again with Lent votes, yes there will be. Third election, PR in place is a promise for the EU referendum. The thing is, with PR in place, the political strategy has to change completely. It will completely change. What's the best thing that happened in 2022? Oh, it ended. It's difficult to say, because even amongst the little triumphs, they've really just been the end of a terrible, or part of a terrible ordeal. You know, Boris Johnson stepping down just really was part of a terrible ordeal. Liz Truss sinking the Tories' chances of winning the next election is still a terrible ordeal, because it has worsened poverty for a lot of people. Even Putin getting a bloody nose is still coming at a terrible human cost. It's quite hard. But then it is sometimes hard for me to consider things like that, because I now spend, my career is spent looking at like doom, stories of doom. Who do I think was the best ye olde PM? Ooh. Depends how old you're allowed to go. Oh, going back to the other one, I meant right to let second homes. Oh, that's a different thing. No, buy to let should. I can see Labour stopping that. In fact, they may have even said they're going to. I can't be sure, but yeah, I mean that's a policy that just that's a no-brainer. You just get rid of it. There's no justification for that. No, I'm quite sure Labour will stop that. It's absolutely ridiculous, that system. I don't actually know who I would say was the best. Again, it depends how long ago you're allowed to go. I'm saying I think the best thing of 2022 will be when I'm playing my keyboard and maybe singing later. Don't get too melancholic talking about doomy politics there. Oh no, I'm quite even-tempered. I don't get too despondent. Governments used to be judged by how many new houses they built in the past. Why not now? Why not indeed? It's the public narrative is very, very carefully controlled with a sophisticated media operation. They will focus people's attentions where they want them to focus. It's what I was saying recently in that video I did maybe yesterday or something, where when inflation is lower next year, the government will go, oh, we've got inflation low. And it's like, no, you haven't. Or when we come out of recession, oh, we've got growth, that's down to our policies. No, it's not. It just naturally happens. And the reason why it may work, and why it usually does work, is because the media will tell people, or they will allow them to think that it's a good thing. Whereas what the media should do is point out, so what is your spending power? What's your buying power as consumers? So a standard basket of goods and services, what proportion of your income is it? Because if it's going up, then that's, you know, as a measure of standard of living, the media should show people measures of standard of living and compare what it is now or at any particular point with what it was when the Conservatives came to power. You know, they should show them something like that, but they won't. Have I seen new houses today with front gardens the size of postage stamp, all about how they can build on the land rather than having them make them a decent size? I will say I'm not that bothered about that. Yes, the reason for it is people trying to maximize their profits. I don't think people really need large backyards. I would actually, if I were like a minister of housing and I could like set certain regulations, do you know what? I would take a dim view of large gardens anyway. I would say build more houses and make sure you've got communal fields, playgrounds, things like that. That would be better for my money. I don't think people need large gardens, really. You know, you need enough in the back so that you can put a shed and stuff like that, and have a bit of running around for the dogs and stuff. Front garden, you don't really need much of a front garden. So I don't mind that personally. You know, if that allows you to build more houses, it's just that the reason for it is not to build more houses as such. It's to maximise the profit. If it was done with a view to actually getting more houses and getting more people into owning their own homes, then, you know, that's fine. You don't need a big garden. As long as you've got somewhere you can go if you need a walk around a field, if you want a bit of greenery, communal playgrounds. Am I optimistic about 2023? I'm always cynically optimistic. It's just that my cynicism often seems better placed than my optimism. Will Sunak survive 2023? I think so, but well, put it this way, I don't think Sunak is going to be replaced this side of a general election. I think if Sunak's government is brought down, they will have to trigger a general election. Because, put it this way, the only thing that can bring Sunak's government down are Conservative MPs. And I'm fairly confident that a majority of Conservative MPs do not think there's anyone better placed than Sunak, as grim as that outlook may be. I think they feel that he is the best they've got right now. So if Sunak were to be fatally wounded by any infighting which emerges, particularly after the local elections in May, I think they would rather go for a general election and just put them all out of their misery than try and swap leader again. So whether Sunak survives next year or not is going to be down to whether or not he can hold the party together and stop a general election. That's really what it comes down to. But I do, if you're asking me, do I think Rishi Sunak will be replaced as leader without a general election? I don't think so. Most houses with large gardens tend to build another house and sell it off. Yeah, I've seen a few like that have done that in the past. Yeah. Nothing worse than living next door to someone who doesn't look after their garden. Yeah, that would probably have been me. Until I gave up and just got gardeners anyway. You don't need one. You don't need much of one. Okay, you do need one. I don't like it when you've got a house that's straight onto a street. There's quite a few houses around here where you walk past and you're looking into someone's lounge window from the pavement, and I wouldn't like that. But I would just close all the curtains, so that's fine. But having a front yard and a backyard is fine, but it doesn't need to be massive. Just consider what it needs to be. You don't need to play cricket in your own backyard. And you don't need to be able to host a party in your front yard either. Just have the back big enough for a reasonable assembly for a barbecue in the summer. Have a room for a shed. And I mean, we've got a garden studio so that I can actually record, but most people don't need that. And in your front yard, just enough to give you a bit of clearance between your front door and the pavement. Somewhere to put the wheelie bins, somewhere to put your car. because, you know, we do need drive space these days for cars. Houses in the UK are the smallest in Europe, fact. Yeah, but they're not too small, I would say. I don't think, you know, you don't need them to be massive. New builds are certainly smaller, yes. Yeah, they are definitely smaller. Cynically optimistic of it being profitably terrible. No. See, it's quite simple. Like when I say I'm an optimistic cynic, what I mean is I think the world is stupid, but that it will get better. It won't necessarily stop being stupid. It will just be less stupid in the future. So I do think at the end of apart from anything else, at the end of 2023 will be a year closer to the next general election, unless there has been one next year. But although there is a window for that, I don't think it's hideously likely. So my house doesn't have a large garden, but it's all right size and all. It's not on a busy road. Unfortunately, there's one nearby. I've lost 3 of my cats on said road. Well, yes, this is a problem. Like with some, there's some people I know like cats who will just have them as house cats if there's particularly busy roads there. But anyway. Oh, someone's saying there, my dad and his father had allotment gardens, fed the public during World War II. Yeah, for people who like a bit of gardening, allotments are a great idea. Because not everyone does. That's the thing. If you like, say, because people might want to grow their own veggies. Not everyone does. So this is the idea of like, for things that some people would want to use their garden for, can you have a communal space that does the same thing? You know, somewhere to walk your dogs or let your children run around and kick a football around. You know, somewhere to grow veggies if that's what you want to do. That's my preference. Because we have only got so much room to build houses, but we do need more houses. We also need to stop having so many properties empty, which things like letting people get mortgages for holiday homes is a real scourge. But anyway, right, I'm going to have to wrap this up quite soon, so let's go through a quick few. The demand for car ownership will decrease once automated taxis are prevalent. Yes, I think that, but I don't know when that's going to be. Yeah, absolutely, when you've got driverless cars, automated taxis will be very viable. I agree, but I don't know when that is. It might be 20 or 30 years time, and the government needs to plan for the next 5 years, not the next 30. As someone who considers herself quite intelligent, who values intelligence, hearing that the world is stupid isn't an appealing message. No, but it is a practical one. Scots take Hogmanay very seriously. I'm not sure what that was in reference to, but yes, they do. I would argue that they take any reason for drinking very seriously, but as I've said earlier on in the thing, out of the whole UK, Scotland is pretty much the only place that has any sort of cultural reason to celebrate New Year. It's not a thing here. People just get drunk. They'll set off some fireworks, they'll shout a bit at midnight, and then that's it. They'll be sick in the toilet. Right, so we'll have to call it there because I've got some lamb in the oven, which is what I tend to have on New Year's Eve. So I just look for an excuse to have a lamb dinner. But yes, thanks very much for coming on, everyone. I've got to try and work out what sort of thumbnail to do for this now, because it's not what I thought it would be. But yeah, we'll be back next week. The schedule should be up to normal now. It'd be quite nice if there was some news. The news has been a bit stifled the last week, but there we go. But have a good evening, everyone. Have a nice New Year's if you are doing anything for New Year's Eve. And until next time, I'll see you later.